Hello students, we will now come to a building typology with which probably we are most familiar with, which all of us use throughout our lifetimes, and that is our houses, places where we live. So we will start with this and we will have at least 2 or 3 segments when we will talk about places to live. Some of these are going to be repetitions because I am collecting the different houses I have talked about under different segments related to Frank Lloyd Wright, Mies van der Rohe and other architects, and club them together so that you can see serially how houses have evolved with time. But why study houses? Coming to this one interesting aspect, historically houses are testing ground for architectural concepts. They are fundamental, adaptable and intimate to the human experience. All of us use houses. Of all architectural types, house is perhaps the most enduring symbol of change and innovation. That does not mean that we have not learned so much from other buildings, as we have seen this in the past series, but somehow the house is a very self-contained fundamental statement in architecture. It is, if we want to analyze them collectively, reveal what are the essential truths about aesthetics and social dynamic and modernity. The design is around human needs, direct expression of architecture in daily life. Houses, their basic functions like sleeping, cooking, staying, it allows for experiment with spaces, form and material at a very relatable scale. Most of the changes we have seen in the modern movement, the experiments first conducted in houses. They are the more creative freedom in designing houses. Unlike larger buildings, houses are mostly without lot of rigid functional constraints. This means we are able to do more within the houses. There are pioneering movements like modernism, brutalism and many more, where houses or even apartment buildings are prototypes for new materials, new techniques and new spatial concepts. Iconic houses like the Steiner House or Maison de Verre or the Glass House by Philip Johnson are labs for architectural ideas. They are small compared to public buildings, so experimentation is easier with respect to the cost and the risks we take while we design the building or put it to erect houses. Innovative architects starting from Frank Lloyd Wright all the way to modern architects like Peter Zumthor have designed language through houses, evolved design language through houses, and they have applied these ideas later to larger projects. Houses reflect cultural values, technological advancement, social changes. Domestic architecture evolves in response to how people live. So the ideas were first tested in houses and then often used in larger architectural typologies. Example are, and we look at that, the case study houses in post-war USA, which were influenced by mid-century suburban development that was taking place worldwide. They are also a reflection of socio-political realities. Like Villa Savoy, its prefab and standardization was a reflection of socialism. Similarly are the prefab houses that were designed and some of them constructed by Walter Gropius. Falling Water is about individual freedom and democracy. Farnsworth House by Mies van der Rohe, a German architect building in the United States, is a merger of American and European ideals. Villa Maria by Alvar Aalto in Finland is about critical regionalism, a separate identity of Scandinavia within Europe and a separate identity, a connection between modern and regional identity. So we have this house evolution under the international style. I am including Falling Water in this, though Falling Water itself is a part of organic architecture, but because the concepts are similar, so I am including it here. There is a spatial experimentation in the vertical direction we find in Adolf Loos' Steiner House, and here for example the Villa Müller. We will look at this house. Spatial experimentation in the horizontal direction we will look at in this series, the Steiner House. We have already earlier seen it in F.L. Wright's houses like the Robie House. Then cubical volumes in Le Corbusier's houses like the Villa Stein, and functional experimentation in Walter Gropius's own house, the Gropius House. This is Villa Stein, Gropius House, Robie House, Steiner House, Villa Müller. Adolf Loos in his writing called Ornament and Crime in 1908 said, there's a war declared on all superfluous decoration which is irrelevant to its age. Ornamentation is wasted manpower, wasted material, wasted capital. Modern man does not need ornamentation. I put a double question mark here because Robert Venturi says exactly the opposite of it. He says ornamentations will never go away. So this debate will continue. But Adolf Tooth said, my architecture is not conceived in plans but in spaces that there is no ground floor, no first floor, only continual spaces, rooms, terraces, etc. The stories merge and spaces relate to each other. Every space requires a different height. The dining room is higher, pantry ceilings are set at different levels or lower levels. So what he did was he experimented by designing spaces and integrating them or connecting them in the vertical direction with changing floor levels. So the best way to understand the house of Adolf Loos is to look at the section of the house. So here we see this section here shows how in this part, for example, the floor levels are changing. Interiors are interconnected multi-level rooms with space and height of each room suited to its function. This is called a Raumplan, design of spaces in the vertical or in 3 dimensions. There are not uniform floor levels. Public spaces have high ceilings, secondary spaces have low ceilings. There is a strict separation between floors that has been removed, and there is a fluid experience as you move through the house. So for example, this section shows the Raumplan more clearly. No strict symmetry or standardization. There is a functional and aesthetic integration. Exterior is very simple and box-like. We look at the picture again. Interior very spatially rich and very intricately designed with varying ceiling heights. This composition of inner space is based on the Raumplan concept. This is the Villa Müller with the box-like outer appearance. So this spatial experimentation vertical direction, when we look at Wright, he talked about seamless transition between inside and outside, but Loos says the public outside and the private inside space should be as separate as possible. The building should be dumb outside and reveal its wealth from inside. So the outside Villa Müller is a cubical box-like shape with flat roof, irregular windows and a clean white facade, as was true for the international style. But when you go inside, there are warm comforting materials and furniture is an eclectic mix of traditional styles. So the inside is so different from the outside, very different from Wright, who used to bring a connection between inside and outside. The design displays his ideas of the Raumplan with a very severe external facade. This severe philosophy is not there in the interiors. Interiors do not have very severe minimalism we see on the outside, but there is a bold use of colors and materials. He creates an environment for the life of its residents inside the building. These are some of the views of the interiors of the Villa Müller, and you can see the changing levels, they get reflected here, and you see eclectic mix of furniture, and it's very rich, vibrant interior. This concept was applied later in other houses. For example, we see that in the Thurlow house in Australia by Harry Sidler. In 1952, the split level dwelling, you enter the house at a mid level, part of the house is above and part of the house is below that. The living areas, etc. are all connected by short staircases. You see this kind of level change as you saw in the Villa Müller pictures. Another example is the split level house by QB Design in 2009 in the USA with multiple short flights of stairs. You find this staggered spaces, staggered levels which are interconnected to each other visually. Living spaces, bedroom areas are placed at different heights. So in the Raumplan, it's not about different floors but different spaces throughout the house which have varying heights. Now coming to the one architect who has probably one of the greatest contributions made in house design is Frank Lloyd Wright. He began, for example, with the Prairie House series, Robie House in Wisconsin 1906, the concrete block house, the Ennis House, Storer House, etc. this one in 1923. Ozonian houses for the modern living, the changing lifestyle of in America and across the world. The Kentucky Knob in Pennsylvania in 1956, and finally in the last years of his life, organic architecture. We saw that in the Falling Water also, the Norman Lakes house in Arizona in 1967. The impact of the Prairie houses is they brought a new domestic architecture with horizontal lines, low pitched roofs, and most importantly open interior spaces, a free flowing plan. This concept of a free flowing plan, we find that, for example, beginning with the Winslow house, breaking the traditional box like spaces or rooms within the house, a seamless transition taking place, for example, in the cross plan of the ward village leading to the linear plan of the Robie house, a more organic free flowing interior movement. This free flowing plan we find in other houses like the Hertley house, Martin house, Coonley house by Frank Lloyd Wright. So, this new concepts of horizontal proportions, overhanging roof for additional shading for indoor thermal comfort, and overall lowering the scale to harmonize with the low-lying or flat prairie landscape. Robie House also had technical innovations for that time. The rim like this roof that you see here, not only it emphasizes the horizontality, but there are these globe lights provided within them with wires set into the ceiling. There are vents and spaces in the ceiling for movement of air. The roof becomes an environmental device for heating in winter and as an extract flue for hot air in summer. So, these are the early stages of bringing in technological innovations within house design. He gave us guiding principles for house design. We will talk about some of them. We have seen this series earlier. Reduce the number of separate rooms to the minimum and make them all work together as an enclosed space. It should be a free flowing plan, so divided that light and air permeate the whole house. Eliminate rooms and house as boxes. All walls work as enclosing screens, an idea that comes from Japanese traditional architecture. Walls, ceilings, floors are one large enclosure with internal subdivisions. Associate the building with the site, make it with human proportions. Use mono materials instead of combination of different materials. There should be heating, lighting, plumbing integral to the house. Furnishings should be one with the building, designed for machine work with straight lines in rectangular forms. We find these free flowing spaces then coming in the modernist houses, early 20th century, in the Villa Savoy, in the Tugendhat house, in the Lincoln house or the Gropius house. We have seen these examples earlier. Similar houses we find in the modernist movement having free and open planning, indicating the rise of modernism, particularly the international style with white planar geometry, with glass, unornamented facades, and the free flowing plan like the Lowell house by Richard Neutra and the E1027 house in France by Eileen Gray. This idea of free flowing interiors has then continued in contemporary houses. In the Fisher house in 1967, the Highline 23 in 2009, these pictures are in the clockwise direction as I read them, so you can relate them to each. This is the Fisher house, the Highline 23, Richard Rogers' own house, the Lakeshore Drive apartments by Mies van der Rohe much earlier, and then in the 21st century, the Greenwich Street project by Winka Double Dam. Again, you can read the pictures in the clockwise direction. Mono materials used in modern buildings like Gren Merkett's corrugated metal in this building, Kengo Kuma using wood, Tadao Ando using exposed fine finished concrete, and Peter Zumthor using stone in his building, the Therme Valls in Switzerland. Another thing that I am trying to do through my slides when I indicate these aspects to you is to increase your architectural vocabulary of buildings, that you are able to see many buildings that I am not able to talk about in detail in these presentations. For example, this project, the Therme Valls by Peter Zumthor, is an iconic project, but I am just showing you a glimpse of this. Please make an effort to read about these projects online or through a book. Then there is integration of furniture with the building. Again, please look at all the pictures in the clockwise direction in the Salk Institute by Louis Kahn, in the Farnsworth House by Mies van der Rohe, the TWA terminal I have talked about earlier by Eero Saarinen, the Ames House by Charles Ames and his wife, and then this house by Louis Barragan, 1948, the Casa Barragan. The impact of falling water, the poetry of interlocked spaces and masses, a great example of organic architecture. Ozonian houses, low-cost house prototype based on the earlier Prairie house design by Frank Lloyd Wright. An important contribution to modern housing. Please refer to my earlier slides on Frank Lloyd Wright, where I have talked in detail about the Ozonian houses. Tugendhat House, we have seen that in detail, built in 1928-1930, and a landmark of modernist residential architecture. Open plan with openness and simplicity, Mises' concept of less is more, structural innovation with a steel skeleton structure, not load-bearing walls that had become common in the international style, whether it was the RCC frame or the steel frame. There is transparency and connection with these very large glass walls connecting to the garden, dissolving the boundaries between inside and outside. This is the idea of Frank Lloyd Wright, now appearing in the works of Mies van der Rohe and other modernist architects. Another aspect of Mises' work is the use of luxurious materials. Please refer to my earlier lectures where I have talked in slightly more detail about this aspect of Mises' work. These are some of the pictures of the Tugendhat House. Here, the interiors of the Tugendhat House and the exteriors of the Tugendhat House. You see this extended glass wall opening towards the garden here in the time in winters. This actually shows the other side of the Tugendhat House where you enter the house. The other interiors of the Tugendhat House see the use of glass, extensive use of glass to connect with the outside. Groupier's house, very modest in scale but revolutionary in impact with regard to what a modern functional house should be. There are a combination of traditional elements, materials like wood, brick and stone, and then innovative materials used in a domestic architecture like glass block, acoustical plaster, chrome banisters. Again, please refer to my earlier lectures on Walter Gropius. Steiner House, a part of the D-style movement, a distinct subset of the parent modernist movement. The D-style house was a basic form of cube that was decomposed or broken up by horizontal projections, the vertical wall, slab, parapet. So, the entire box has been decomposed. This whole idea of breaking the box or destroying the box to create more fluid and open space was the idea of F.L. Wright. He created this basis of a new plasticity in architecture. We find that evolution in his work, like I showed you in the previous slide, from the square plan of Winslow to the cross plan of Vaudeville's, linear plan of Robie House to the amazingly open plan of falling water. So this was, the Steiner House was spatial experimentation in the horizontal direction like the works of Wright with D-style aesthetic, very flexible interior, connection with the outside through large windows and even corner glazing, and this composition of vertical and horizontal planes. Now you will find that many of these ideas are being repeated, because when we talk of large windows and corner glazing etc. to connect with the outside, we have talked about that in the works of Mies also. So it became a common trend throughout the international style. These are these flexible interiors with large windows of the Steiner House. This is D-style art. So the actual movement began in the world of art and then carried on into the world of architecture with this integration of furniture and architecture and D-style colors and style within the house. Thus, we have seen this earlier that when we talk of a new architecture, all coming out of house design initially, it was Wright's propositions, Corbusier's 5 points of a new architecture, Mises' various elements used in his construction like steel, glass, stone, etc. and Gropius more about functional planning. Of course, two of them began the experimentation in buildings other than houses. In Gropius's case, we find that in the Bauhaus, and in Mies's case, we find that in some early houses and then more prominently in the Barcelona pavilion. This is the Victoria McCalman House in Los Angeles by R.M. Schindler. This house is also part of the international style. So we see how the movement spread across the Atlantic to America. It has also got a flat roof, ribbon windows and white planar geometry with this open plan and built-in furniture. So this house actually becomes a combination of Wright and the international style. Then we have the Villa Schmink in Germany by Hans Scharoun. These are some of the examples that I have not talked with you about earlier, but they are a part of the international movement. So here the house was rotated by 30 degrees around the axis. The entrance stairs and utilities are facing towards the southwest side. Now Schrader, Hans Scharoun, though a part of the international style, rejected the idea of machine for living model of Le Corbusier. Instead, he said he is creating a house for living in freedom, light, openness, connection to nature. This is called as expressionist functionalism. There doesn't seem to be much in difference from the international style because those houses also had this light and openness and connection with nature, but the way this house has been put together, how dramatically the axis has been changed and the house has been put together was different from the box-like approach of the international style houses in the early years. So here we find the hall connecting all the stories, joining the more functional part of the house to dining and living. So there are some attractive results coming out with these controlled fractures and curvatures, which was a unique example in the international style series, this house by Hans Scharoun. The terraces are the hallmark of the building with this dramatic cantilevers, and then the terraces are then mirrored in the pond, and during the night a different atmosphere is created by a range of these purpose designed lamps in the ceiling. Then we come to the Kaufmann house with the clear mass, extensive glazing built in the hot climate, in a desert-like climate of California, adjustable aluminium blinds that are protecting the sitting areas from the sun and sand. The roof is coated with ceramic granules to reduce heat absorption. Pipes circulate below both floors and roof slabs carrying hot or cold water. So in fact there are two Kaufmann houses. This Kaufmann house designed in the desert in California by Richard Neutra. The earlier Kaufmann house was also there, which is generally known as Falling Water by Frank Lloyd Wright in the dense forest of Pennsylvania in 1936. This house has a pinwheel plan. If you want to know another pinwheel plan from another example, look at the Vaudevillett's house. So here we have this example of the pinwheel plan. The similar example here in the Kaufmann house. Also we find that in the brick country house of Mies van der Rohe. The design is simplistic. The central living and dining room is the heart of the house. Rest are the branches which are like on the pinwheel, each in the cardinal direction east, west, north, south. Center, each wing branches out with its own specific function. The most important aspects are oriented east and west. Supporting features are oriented north and south. This is the Kaufmann house. One important, we'll come to that. When sliding glass doors are opened, the differentiation between the internal and the external part of the house disappear. There is a flowing space Richard Neutra had learnt under Frank Lloyd Wright in Taliesin. So this spectacular view is what we get in the Kaufmann house. This is the landscape of the Kaufmann house. And then one of the most iconic features is the swimming pool. It creates a compositional balance in the overall design. The house without the pool seems unbalanced and heavy as the wings are not equally proportioned in the pinwheel design. But with the addition and placement of this spool, there is an entire cohesive balance and harmony throughout the design. Remove the spool and the house looks a little unbalanced. This side seems to be way too extended. Put the pool here and the house gets into a kind of an design balance. These are some of the other pictures of the Kaufmann house. And then there is the Farnsworth house. I have already talked about in detail. This was designed for Dr. Edith Farnsworth, and iconic glass and steel weekend house, international style, Mises' idea of minimalism, 8 I-section columns on which the entire house is standing. So we compare his earlier work to the Farnsworth house. In the Tugendhat house in 1930, we find the same minimalism that appears later in 1950s in the Farnsworth house, or the open floor plan of falling water in 1936 again appears in Mises' work in the Farnsworth house in the 50s and also in the earlier project of the Tugendhat house. Now let us come to the case study house program. The case study homes focus on the use of new materials and technologies that actually developed or were developed in World War II for the World War. The intention is to make the house out of prefabricated materials that would not interrupt the work on site, because the materials are being manufactured in the factory, shipped on site and assembled, easy to build, exhibit a modern style. So one of the examples is Charles and Ray Ames House in Los Angeles. Now in the University of South California, and the School of Architecture became a hotbed of new ideas as a result of the World War. The questions explored were how architecture should respond to social issues like the growing population and need for low cost housing, how to apply new materials and industrialized techniques in wartime economy such as mass production, prefabrication, and how to apply these technologies in peacetime. So Pierre Koenig gave 2 case study houses in Los Angeles called Case Study House 21 and 22. Both were highly abstract in plan and elevation, have minimal rectangular exposed steel frames and full height glass walls. Koenig ultimately ended up designing 5 houses. So case study house number 21, the orientation of glazed walls is north-south, solid walls is east-west. So we have north-south is glazed, east-west is solid. The most interesting part of the house, the basic design element, is this island created in between, which has the washroom, and it divides the living area from the 2 bedrooms. By disengaging the bathroom from exterior walls and facing them onto the court, the curtain walls become very simplified and you get complete glazing along the north-south direction. So it completely changed the concept and way the bathrooms were to be located. The entire house is a series of 10 by 22 feet bays which are 9 feet high. This is how each frame has been put together, and the frames are fabricated and delivered on site in one piece and then assembled. Another important aspect of the house is that it is completely surrounded by pools of water, introduces a completely new concept in making water an integral part of both the structure and the landscape. During the hot months, the water is pumped hydraulically from the pools to a roof gutter. From the roof gutter through outlets, it falls back again, it is circulated and it freshens the pools again. These are some of the pictures of the case study house number 21. And similar, we find different 20th century houses which have similar profiles. So the original ideas of the modernist international style houses got replicated in later houses also in the 20th century. Not only do we find that in the Farnsworth house, but in much later houses like the De Blas house by Alberto Campabeza and the Kohler house in Canada by Julie Snow. Again, I am trying or making an attempt to show you more number of buildings so that your architectural vocabulary gets extended, though we may not be able to talk in detail about some of these projects. In Julie Snow's house, it has a similar profile like the Farnsworth house. You find that very clearly in the way the house has been designed. So, Farnsworth house in the 1950s, Julie Snow's house in 2000. Another thing is, in fact, Julie Snow's house seems to be a combination of two. Not only does it resemble the Farnsworth house in the way the whole structure has been put together, it also resembles the cantilevered plates of the falling water, as you see it is on the side of the slope. So, Julie Snow's house bears similarity seems to be a combination of the Farnsworth and the falling water in its overall massing. Is this an example of new modernism? I leave it as a question mark. New modernism means a revival of modernism in the 21st century. I will stop here and we will start the next series where we will see another case study house by Pierre Koenig, which is called the Stahl House, and several other series as we will go from the 20th to the 21st century, seeing a series of houses by iconic architects. Thank you.